Good evening. I'm Anchorpete, and I'm here with Brian, who is my co-host on our channel, Comic Books Transformed. How's it going, Brian?
Doing good, Pete. How are you?
So far, so good. You guys might remember Brian. He's been on a couple episodes of the Lastercast, and we used to call our other channel Ramblings from the Rod Pod. But just this week, we changed it to Comic Books Transformed. So if you haven't subscribed to that channel, hop on over there and join us, because we talk about a lot of different things like Disney Plus Marvel shows and Netflix superhero shows like Jupiter's Legacy and any kind of new and upcoming comic book based movie. So the reason why we have Brian on the Lastercast channel today is because Brian plays a lot of different video games, and he's a big fan of the Resident Evil series. And so today, Brian and I are going to be talking about Resident Evil Infinite Darkness. So, Brian, first off, you said that you haven't seen the Resident Evil animated movies, right?
That is correct. So there's been 3 of them, and I have not seen any of those. I mainly just played most of the main games, I'd say.
Okay. And then so you did show that clip, though, of like those 2 guys just shooting at each other randomly.
Yeah, that's for the most recent one, and it's kind of comical. It's like it's almost like if it was like a sword fight, but with pistols.
Yeah.
And it's like you have to look at it. It's absolutely like worth a good laugh.
Yeah. Like, what the hell were they thinking, man? It's so bizarre.
I mean, honestly, though, it kind of goes with the whole Resident Evil like motif. Like everything starts off generally like really scary, and then it just kind of gets bigger and more actiony, and then ridiculous. So, okay. I mean, that's not like it's kind of par for the course, to be honest.
Okay. Well, speaking of Resident Evil being scary, I was hoping that today we could also talk about Resident Evil 8, which you just beat, right?
Yes, I literally beat it this morning.
Nice, man. Nice. Yeah. So let's talk about this trailer, and then we can talk about your experience playing Resident Evil 8.
Sure.
Okay, so cool. So I did a little research because I don't really know that much about Resident Evil. I played the first game. I think I might have seen the first movie with Mila Jovovich, and I know that the movies are like very different from the games, right?
Yeah, they're very different. I mean, the Alice character does not exist in the games, and the movies do eventually feature the game characters, maybe a little more prominently, but still, like Alice is still the main star of all of them. So, yeah, and I have to also say that they are making another Resident Evil movie.
Okay.
Separate from the previous ones, and it will actually have the characters from the game that you'll also may be seeing in this Infinite Darkness series.
Oh, cool. Okay. Well, in my research for this Infinite Darkness series, I saw that it takes place in 2006, and that it takes place after the events of Resident Evil 2.
Yes. So the timelines for these games are still a little caught in the past.
Yeah.
The more recent ones have caught it up a little bit, but up until I want to say 6 or so, they only got to like 2013, I think.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it because? Go ahead.
And I was going to say that the original game, I believe, took place in the late 90s. I don't remember if it was 96 or 98, one of those.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you said that, because it looks like it said that it came out in 1998, Resident Evil 2, the game.
Yeah.
And then, like, they just did a remake of Resident Evil 2 in 2019, right?
Yeah, that was a great game.
Yeah. So, like, the characters in that game, in the remake of Resident Evil 2, they look like in this trailer, right?
Yeah, the graphics of the games have obviously gotten a lot better. That's a big reason for the remakes. They do look very similar to the movie, but honestly, the outside of the kind of lip sync animations, like the graphics of this series look incredible. They look very, very lifelike.
Yeah,
it's impressive. But again, it's just the one thing that no one can solve is like the facial movements. Just everything always looks kind of fake and weird. And,
yeah.
Again, that's what happens here.
Yeah, man. Like, from watching the trailer, and I can actually like kind of play the trailer while we're talking too. What do you call it? The funny thing is, I downloaded the trailer to put on our video today, and I guess I got the German version because everyone's just like speaking in German in it. But yeah. So I'm just gonna throw that on here, but we're gonna turn the volume off.
Okay.
Yeah. So here we go. Oh, the volume is off. No, it's not. Okay, there we go.
There we go.
So, like you said, it looks really, really good, especially like when you're not even looking at a person's face, like just the scenery and stuff. That looks like a real movie.
Yeah, that looks like real perspiration there.
Yeah. I think the only thing that kind of turns me off about this is when they are talking and when they are emoting, that looks the most fake. Like it doesn't really sync up with how they're talking.
Yeah, again, that's a pitfall of any animation. I mean, and some things have done it better, and it works better when they're when the characters don't look realistic. You know, if they're cartoon, look at it, it just tends to work better because you know you're not processing that it's a human face. Like that, you just showed me that maybe the hair's a little shiny, but like that looks almost real. You know.
Yeah, he looks really good, and that is the main character, right? That is Leon.
That's Leon. Yeah. So I mean, arguably there are many main characters in Resident Evil, you know, but he is one of the more prominent ones that has been in a lot of the game, in multiple games and a lot of these movies.
Okay, well, so like when I was doing my research, it said that for Resident Evil 2, the way the story works is that he's like a cop that's on his first day of the job, right?
Yeah.
And then there's a virus outbreak in Raccoon City, and he meets up with Claire Redfield, she's Chris Redfield's sister, right?
Correct.
Yeah. And I know Chris Redfield's kind of like the biggest protagonist out of the whole series.
Yeah, he was one of the two choosable protagonists in the first game, and he's probably had the most appearances in over the course of the series by this point.
And he's even in Resident Evil Village, right? The one you just played?
That is correct.
Yeah. I love how like I just keep asking questions like, this is right? This is right. It's like I have no idea what I'm talking about, but I know that you do. So what I was kind of confused about though was it seems like in this trailer that he's not a cop. It seems like he's like working for the government or something, and that it doesn't take place in Raccoon City. It takes place in like Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so this is bridging the gap between Resident Evil 2 and probably 4. 4 also stars Leon as the main character, and that takes place in Europe. And in that game, at the beginning of that game, it's 6 years after the events of Resident Evil 2 and 3. Okay. And you know, Leon works for the Secret Service actually, and he's on a mission to go actually find the president's daughter. So this is probably going to say how he got wrapped up in working with the government. And you know, in one of the later games too, there is a whole plot involving the government. And these characters.
Oh, okay. So that's cool. I thought that maybe it was like something separate from the games altogether, but I like that it's sort of like filler tissue for the story.
Yeah, it seems like it's going to be, and it's like, man, I don't know how they cram all this stuff in timelines.
Well, how does it work? Like, is Resident Evil 3 like taking place at the same time as Resident Evil 2?
Resident Evil 3 starts slightly before Resident Evil 2 and then finishes slightly after Resident Evil 2. But it's all within like a good, you know, like 72 hours or something like that.
Okay, cool. Does it take place in Raccoon City too or no?
Yeah, 2 and 3 are both in Raccoon City. So the second game you can choose to play as Leon or Claire. And then the third game there's no choice and you only play as Jill, for what was also from the first game.
Oh, okay. But let me ask you this, like, because we're talking about all the different characters in the series, right? Are they all just kind of like cipher characters for the player when they're playing them? Like, you know, are they kind of just generic, or do you have a specific character that you like a lot because of their personality?
Oh yeah, I very much prefer. I like Leon a lot, and I like Jill a lot. So, Chris is growing on me now too. I always used to hate Chris.
Yeah,
he was always this like boring kind of like generic soldier kind of guy, but in the last 2 games, Resident Evil 7 and 8, he's grown on me a little bit.
Okay,
but yeah, Leon I like. I played as Jill in the first game, the first time around. Second game I started as Leon, and then you play as Jill in the third game. You play as Leon in the fourth game, and you know, they get interchangeable. Like 5, you play as Chris again, and then 6, you play as a whole ton of people.
Really? Okay. Is 6 still continuing that story? Like, is this all just one big story? Like, even the village one and the one that you were telling me about last time, it's all one story?
All one big, insane story of people trying to manipulate biological weapons.
Yeah. Well, like one of the things that happened today was I did some research on this, and I found this other YouTube video where some guy just broke down the entire series, right? And I started watching it, but it was like an hour, and I didn't have a lot of time today. But it looks like it's about like the Umbrella Corporation, and they find this like specific flower, right? That they use. It was like in Africa, and then from that flower they developed the T virus, I think.
Yeah, the T virus is the original one. Then the second game has the G virus.
Yeah.
There's the progenitor virus. There's the C virus. There's there's like almost every game has a different virus, a slight variation on it.
Okay.
Ultimately, always it's some crazy rich person or corporation just trying to make a buck by selling, zombie weapons.
So which one do you like the best?
That's a great question. I mean, for the longest time, I really, really liked 4. It was a little more. That was the originally in the GameCube, so it was like a little bit of a step up in graphics.
Damn. Okay.
I love the original 2 and 3. They've remade 2 and 3. I've had a lot of fun with those, and I really do like this new one a lot too. 8.
Okay.
So,
okay.
I would say the original 4, the remake of 2, and I guess 8.
Damn. Okay. All right. Nice, man. Yeah. Like I said, I've only played like a little bit of the first one, and I remember like it came out when we were still pretty young. I think like it says the second one came out in 1998. So the first one must have came out in like 1996 or something.
It was earlier. 5 or 6. It was one of the first games to the original PlayStation. So
yeah. And so I'm gonna admit a little embarrassing thing on the show, but like I was still kind of playing like imaginary games even at that point in my life, even though I was like 13 or 14. I remember like we used to like kind of do like a Resident Evil kind of game, where we were like, because they have that team, right? Stars, isn't that the name of their team? Yeah. And we'd be like members of the Stars team. We'd infiltrate something. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends when I was in high school, so
I didn't.
That's probably the reason why. Yeah. That's why we're doing a show like this right now, But well, let's see. Let's talk about this trailer a little bit more, and then we'll talk about Resident Evil 8. Sure. So, just looking at what we're watching, it looks like the White House gets attacked. I know in the description it says that there is like a hacker attack that Leon is looking into, and then there's this like zombie attack. And I was going to ask you. I know that in Resident Evil 2. There's like an Asian woman, right? Is that who this is right here?
In Resident Evil 2, there's a side character, Ada Wong. You play as her a little bit in various points in the series. I don't know. There's one bad habit that these games have is a lot of them, they change the way the characters look over time. And they look drastically different. One of the few characters that I think is most consistent is actually Leon, because he always has the exact same haircut. But everybody else always looks a little different, and Chris especially.
Yeah.
If you look up like the evolution of Chris Redfield on like Google, and you'll see a bunch of pictures, and it looks like a different character every single time.
Okay. Yeah. I remember seeing a picture of him in Resident Evil 8, and I was like, "Who the hell is that?"
Yeah. So that could be Ada Wong. I mean, she's really the only prominent Asian character in the series, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
and she also has a lot of big corporation, government, secret kind of dealings.
Okay, all right. Well, yeah. So that might be her. In this trailer too, right here, they just showed like a rat. Like it looked like it was infected. And I know that's how the plague spreads through Raccoon City, right? Is it rats get infected?
Yeah. So I mean, they pretty much get everything from from the first game and the prequel game, Resident Evil 0. But essentially, someone tries to steal one of the viruses, and the case they're carrying, it breaks, and the rats get it, and then it spreads very quickly to the nearby Raccoon City.
Oh, okay. Well, do the rats look like that? Because that's pretty messed up looking.
No, they did not. They look like crappy little polygons.
Oh, okay. That's right. Yeah, the game's pretty old, yeah. So it looks like there's some kind of crazy facility here, too. And because it's in another language, right? They call it Biohazard, right? That's what they call it outside of America.
Yeah, Biohazard is the original Japanese name, yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it looks like the facility's kind of breaking down or something like that. And then you have this like big green guy who looks kind of like the Hulk. Has there ever been a guy in the game that looks like him?
Yeah, almost every game has a tyrant kind of thing. That's the way they called the original. It's just a big hulking zombie that's super durable and super strong. It's always more of a boss character. And a lot of the games too, that character will follow you throughout the game. So it's always a little terrifying. They don't normally speak. I believe this character speaks here. So, he seems to have retained a little bit of his mental capacities, which is not super common with these viruses. So.
Oh, yeah. That's what they were saying in that video I was watching. Yeah, it's funny. He says something kind of generic. He says something like, I'm going to show you fear or something like that. I can't, because this is the German version, so I don't know what the hell he would say here. But
it's funny to mention that one of the virus versions is like a fear variant. It's from one of the side games, one of the Revelations games. I forgot what it's called. But yeah, it's a virus. It's a zombie virus that has a basis in fear. So
okay. Yeah, it's got this like really rich mythology, and I was enjoying watching the story of it. I probably would enjoy playing it too. But then I don't know if it's translated that well into the Mila Jovovich films. Like I remember watching the first movie and not really being impressed.
No, I mean, other than it taking place in a mansion, in a remote mansion, like it's not really that close to the game. I don't know if they had any characters from the movie, from the games in that first movie, but I mean, they eventually do add them. And like I mentioned earlier, like essentially the games always start out very simple. There's just the zombie there, and it's early on it's very creepy and scary every single time. And then as it goes on, you get more weapons and you get stronger, and you get the jump scares work a little less. It gets a little more action oriented. It's a little more about resource management and then it's less that it's a creepy mansion and it turns into some big futuristic looking lab where there's all these experiments. And that pretty much is the path in every single game. It starts off really creepy and then gets really like sci-fi-y almost by the end.
Okay. Yeah, well, I mean, looking at this, like it looks extremely sci-fi at this point. I mean, look at this like facility right here. Yeah. So I think unless you have anything else to say about the trailer, we could talk about Resident Evil 8.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say is that we mentioned that there are 3 other existing Resident Evil CGI movies.
Yeah.
Or did we not mention that? Did we talk about that beforehand?
We kind of mentioned it a little bit at the beginning.
Okay, so I'm very curious if this will connect to any of those. I have not seen them, but I mean I'm willing to watch them before this comes out. I got like a month and a half. Comes out in July.
Yeah, it comes out July 8th, day before my kid's birthday.
Nice.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, I would check those out too. I bet they're available on some kind of streaming service. I remember I saw one of them, which was I think it was Degeneration, and that's the one where it's like in an airport and the T virus spreads in the airport. It was pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's the first one. And yeah, I mean, if this is on Netflix, there's a good chance those movies might be on Netflix right now. So we should definitely look into that.
Yeah. All of these, this is a little side tangent and stuff, but all these kind of remind me of Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within.
Okay.
You know how it's like, it essentially looks like a really nice cutscene to a video game. And Final Fantasy, I know you love the series, but I've never played any of the games. But that movie, I remember how just like dark and disturbing that movie was.
Yeah, it was pretty dark and disturbing. And also, with the very few exceptions, it almost had nothing to do with anything in Final Fantasy.
Right.
But I still enjoyed it at the time because it was like, oh, wow, I get to go to a movie theater and watch something that says Final Fantasy on it.
Yeah, and it had like little Easter eggs in it too, right?
Yeah, there's probably some like I don't really remember that one too well, but I mean there probably were some very common underlying factors like spells and materia or Moogles or espers or some crap.
Yeah, and there was some guy named Sid too, isn't there? Always like a guy named Sid.
Oh yeah, there's always a Sid. Yeah.
I sound like an old man trying to be like hip with like a young kid. Like, hey, there's a guy named
that too, right?
yeah. There's somebody named Sid or something. Yeah,
and those big chickens, the chocobos. Oh man,
we're getting all the views tonight. So anyway, let's talk about Resident Evil 8, man, because like that's the big thing that everyone's talking about. It's all over Twitter. Everyone's excited about that.
Yeah. So Resident Evil 8, you're actually playing as the same protagonist as Resident Evil 7, who is Ethan Winters. Everything does connect. I don't want to spoil the game too much here, so I'll just kind of talk about it very generally. But what I liked about the 7th and 8th games is, first of all, they kind of switched it up. So the 6th game was not well received. It has some of like the craziest, most ridiculous, convoluted story plot points of the entire series. Okay. So they kind of started from scratch for this game, and the 7 and 8 are actually first-person games, where all the other ones were third-person or kind of fixed perspective, and it actually adds to the kind of terror. So the 7th game, like the very beginning, it kind of gives you some vibes of like Evil Dead. The X-Files episode Home, it felt like a big theme there. And they even kind of had like an area that was almost like Saw influenced. So they kind of borrowed from a lot of, I feel like they were inspired by a lot of other horror movies outside of the zombie genre for the 7th game. And they kind of continue that theme in 8. So in this game, the zombie-esque enemies are kind of like either undead creatures, or they're kind of like a werewolf kind of thing called lichens. I mean, I know like lycanthrope. They're not actually werewolves, but they're actually very similar to the enemy types in Resident Evil 4. So they can use weapons, and they have some cognitive ability, but they're freaking terrifying. One of the first things that happens, and it's kind of like a recurring theme in the most recent 2 games, is the character you play takes a beating.
Oh yeah.
On your first enemy encounter in this game, there's like a cutscene. It has to happen. You can't avoid it. Like, you get 2 of your fingers ripped off on your hand, and you just live with that the whole game. You're just operating with 3 fingers on this hand and 5 on the other the whole game.
Oh shit!
And they just destroy the hell out of this character, Ethan. And there is a story point that kind of explains that later on. Okay. If anyone's curious, but yeah. So you start out, and it's kind of inspired by, I guess, more traditional horror monsters. So we have werewolves. We have like a vampire type, which is the very popular Lady Dimitrescu, who is one of the first bosses you actually will fight. And Ares will run around. You run around her castle, and she has like these 3 vampire-ish daughters, and she's a giant 9-foot tall vampire lady that the internet is obsessed with.
Yes, they really are, man.
Beyond that, there are 4 like lords you have to fight, essentially, and they're all kind of based on some other form of horror. So the second one is a little more. It's actually really interesting. There's a whole section in the game where there's like no combat. It's just stealth, and it's just all illusions and stuff. And there's just some ladies like controlling crazy dolls and stuff. So I feel like that's like almost like referencing like the Annabelle series. Yeah. Or even Chucky to a lesser extent, but I think more likely Annabelle. And at that point, like those 2 areas up, like it's still a really scary game. And there's some really disturbing things there. And after that, it gets a little more like actiony and like ridiculous. You fight a giant fish monster, and then there's this almost like he's almost like a zombie Magneto.
Whoa, what?
And he's like a mixture of like a zombie Magneto and Forge. Like he experiments on these people, and he adds all these mechanical parts to them, and you have to fight them. And then he basically has Magneto powers.
Oh, okay. I was wondering with that, because I was wondering, is it like, are you talking about like Magneto's character, the way he is, or is he like the powers? So, okay, he's got powers. Okay.
Actually, a little of both, but more so the powers.
Okay. I don't understand, though. I don't understand how like this like thematically ties in with the other story. Like the other story, it seems like it's always been like the Umbrella Corporation and like this virus, and like people always trying to use the virus, like you said before, and that like this, like how do they connect that to what you're describing?
Sure. So this is going to get a little to the spoiler territory. So if you don't want to hear that, just feel free to turn off. Okay. So it is actually directly linked to the original start of the T virus was. So very late in the game, you're actually playing a section of the game as Chris, and he's going through the lab of the main antagonist, Mother Miranda. So Mother Miranda created those four lords by giving them this kind of parasite that was based off of that flower that was found in Africa. So Mother Miranda is actually the person who originally found the flower, and she shared her research with the three scientists that were originally the founders of the Umbrella Corporation. So that's and they specifically name drop what's his name?
Is one of them Birkin? Is there
No. Birkin worked for Spencer. No, he worked for Marcus and Spencer. Birkin was a character in the second game. He was more of a he was a scientist, but he wasn't one of like the corporate founders of the Umbrella Corporation. So this was one of the corporate founders. He basically writes her a letter saying, "Thank you for sharing this with me. I have your goal is to actually resurrect a single person, but my ambition is to turn this into more of a weapon, and how to utilize it on a larger scale." And he mentions forming a company to do that. So essentially, this branches off of that story by all being based on that original flower that they found in Africa.
Oh, very cool. Very cool. Man, I love that. I love when there's like threads that tie it all together.
Yeah. And they do it a lot, but like this, sometimes it just gets so ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. I've seen footage from the movies, like the Mila Jovovich movies. And I know that they're not really based on the games and they have different characters, but like it's just so ridiculous. I remember there was one where like they had like clones of Mila Jovovich and they were all like attacking this facility. And then they had the guy that was like from Game of Thrones that was with that actor that like he was in Tomb Raider too. And he was Daenerys's, the guy that loved Daenerys. You know who I'm talking about? Jonah Mormont, right? That actor.
Okay, yeah.
He's in a couple of the Mila Jovovich movies.
Yeah, I know you're talking about, yes.
Yeah, and then they have Wesker in the movies too.
Yeah. Most of the characters do make appearances in the movies, and they do get more of a prominent role later on. But it's still essentially the Alice show in all those movies. And I haven't seen many of them. I think I saw the first two, maybe three.
Yeah,
there are like 6 or 7 of those.
Oh, at least, yeah. And like there is like the apocalypse eventually, right? And they kind of like try to rebuild after it too. It's
and by that point, I hadn't seen any of them, so maybe I'll watch those sometime too. I'm on a little bit of a kick.
Yeah, I don't blame you. It seems like everyone is on a Resident Evil kick right now.
Yeah, I mean, when a new game comes out and there's a lot of hype around it. I mean, 7 was very well received. I think this one's being well received as well. So and they do absolutely set up another game at the end of this one. So
nice. How does the 7th game tie into this overarching story?
Okay, so the 7th game, as I mentioned, you're playing as Ethan Winters. So he's essentially looking for his wife who has been missing for 3 years.
Okay.
He gets a random email with the video message of his wife saying to come find her in Louisiana. So he just goes out there and he essentially stumbles on this kind of like shack in the middle of nowhere where this family called the Bakers are. And the second you see them, you just know something's weird about them. They're all like kind of twitchy and weird looking, and they're doing weird stuff. They're all, look discolored and everything. And essentially, they were all modified by this mold that also is essentially based on the original flower thing.
Man, that one fucking flower really caused a lot of damage.
It fucking caused everything to get messed up.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll ever take it to like a biblical level and they'll kind of imply that like that flower was found at like a Garden of Eden kind of thing.
I wouldn't be surprised. I'm sure they've probably hinted at things like that. I mean, people do tend to have a religious tint on it, sort of. Maybe in the 4th game more so. I feel like there was more of a cult around it. So I mean, that definitely took a religious aspect to it.
Well, let me ask you this. This could be maybe my last question too. Are the games made in Japan and then it's sort of translated into English, or is it like that was the way it was initially and then it became like an American thing? Is it like Transformers, where like it was something in Japan. They converted it into English.
So that's a great question. So most of the Resident Evil games, Resident Evil games are made by Capcom. Capcom is a Japanese company.
Right.
So I don't know what team made the more recent games, but the previous ones were generally made by Japanese people.
Okay.
It's interesting, though. The reason I'm questioning it is because first-person games tend to not do very well in Japan, and these are first-person games. So I'd be curious if Japanese people were making a first-person game. But I mean, it's not like they make them there first. A lot of the times now, and then we wait 6 months for it to come out here. Like they generally do have a global launch for these larger scale games, so that everyone gets them at approximately the same time.
Okay. I said one last question, but then you just made me think of another question. So, like, if they're not really into first person games, what games are they really into in Japan? Can you speak for the whole Japanese culture, please?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'm really Japanese. I mean, I took Japanese in college. I think I'm qualified. Oh, God, what is popular in Japan? Not first-person shooters, I'll tell you that.
Not first. Okay.
So yeah, like RPGs are popular.
Okay.
Definitely. God, I don't even know. I have no idea. It changes all the time. But definitely, like, Call of Duty is not popular there. You know.
Okay.
Xboxes are not popular there. Because that's like, you know, the Halo machine, really. You know, and there's a whole thing about how X is like a very negative connotation in Japan. So it's essentially calling it the no box in Japan.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Dude, I had no idea about like 75% of the stuff that you talked about tonight. So, so like, I really appreciate you coming on here and talking about this because, you know, we are a horror channel on the Lastercast, and horror video games, like we said in our last episode with you, they seem to be on a rise right now. There seem to be a lot of horror games, and it's good to have someone that, unlike me or Danny, that actually plays them.
Well, I recommend going to find an old system and buying some cheap games. I mean, you probably get some cheap ones for, you know, pretty easily now these days.
I have some friends who are very kind, and they kind of treat me like they're like younger child, or like the younger sibling, and they just hand me down video game systems because they always get really awesome video game systems, and they're like, oh, well, we're done with this kind of new one. Here's this system, and I have an Xbox 360, but I'm about to get a PlayStation 4.
Okay, so PlayStation 4, you can get the remakes of Resident Evil 2 and 3. They're like $20 each. So I mean, like, you could totally do that. Like,
dude, GameStop, here I come, man.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, Brian, dude, thanks so much for coming on. And I just want to tell the people that watch the Lastercast channel that Danny, like he said, is coming back. You know, he lost his father recently, but he is coming back to the channel. He's going to review some of the remaining Saw movies with his daughter, Charlotte. And then Danny and I are going to do a live review of Spiral this weekend. So there'll be a review then. And then on the other channel, the channel I'm on with Brian, which is called now Comic Books Transformed, we have an episode where we review Jupiter's Legacy. And so we are reviewing episodes 3 and 4, and that's coming out probably in about 2 days. So you guys can come check out our channel too. So yeah, we always have content coming on all 3 of my freaking channels, and Brian is usually on at least 2 of them. So, so until then, we'll see you guys.